Good evening. My name is Crystal Love-Lazard. I am part of the team that is your new facilitation service. We are the Institute for Local Government. For those of you who don't know, we're the nonprofit affiliate of the California League of Cities, the State Association of Counties, and the Special Districts Association. So our role, and it's myself and my colleague Sam Miguel, but our role is really to ensure a productive meeting, good dialogue, where actions are identified and everybody feels and is heard. So thank you in advance for your attendance tonight. If you're new like me, here's some logistics. There is food in the corner. The restrooms are over here to this corner. Please help yourself and take breaks as needed whenever you need. So the agenda tonight, we're going to talk with the city of Fresno. We'll do a brief presentation, which will go over the coordination between the Air District and the city and review the current process for entitlement applications and how the public can really engage in that. Then we're going to dig into the SERP itself and talk about the changes that have been made to the SERP in response to the comments that folks in this room have been making over the last several months. And then we'll wrap up with some next steps and kind of outline where this process is going over the next 2 months. Any questions before we get going? Okay. Jennifer?
Carry it up. Thank you. Good evening. How is everybody tonight? Woo! I am hot and sweaty. I have been getting over here, and I apologize if I'm not quite all together yet. So at the last couple of meetings, we've had some dialogue at various tables regarding the process for development applications and what the city does and how the public can participate. And it seems like there was an understanding that maybe there wasn't a lot of coordination right now between the Air District and the city in terms of entitlement applications and how that works from a planning perspective. So I wanted to kind of go through what we currently do, some of the new things that we've added over the last couple of years to make the process a little more transparent, and then give you some tools that you can use on the website to look at what's currently going on, whether it's in your neighborhood or a property that you're just curious about. So the city receives lots of different kinds of applications for entitlements. An entitlement is just a permit to use your property in a certain way. So an entitlement could be a zoning that you're requesting, whether it's a multifamily or an office building. It could be a conditional use permit for alcohol or for another use. It could be a variance. You're asking for something to vary from our standards. So there's a wide variety of entitlements that the city processes throughout the year. We process probably about 5,000 to 6,000 applications for entitlements during the year, and they range anywhere from zone clearance. I'm opening a business in an existing shopping center, and I just want permission to do that, all the way up to a general plan amendment, a rezone, and conditional use permits. So how does that process work? So the city just recently changed the software program that it uses to track all of our land use, from entitlements to building permits to public works, some public works projects, as well as code enforcement on the back end. And that process can actually be tracked on our website. So the portal is actually called Faster, and so you can get to it directly from the city's website. And so an applicant will get on the website, or they'll come into, or they'll come into City Hall and they'll say, I would like to submit an application. Then they go through a series of questions. They answer questions about the project. Is it zoned properly? How large of a facility is it going to be? Where is the property? Are you the owner? Are you a developer of the project? And it goes through a long series of questions. And hopefully we'll get to see it. And then what the city does when it receives an application is it determines, is that application complete or not complete? Did they give us enough information to process the application? And once we determine it's complete and we accept the application, then we route it to internal departments and to outside agencies like Caltrans, like PG&E, like the Air District, who then provide comments to us related to that application. Once we get that application, get all of those comments back, then we do what's called an environmental assessment. So then we determine its level as it relates to the California Environmental Quality Act, which we talked about a couple weeks ago in terms of CEQA and how our process works. So then we'll determine, based on the information that's provided, whether their input is a condition of a project or if it's actually a mitigation measure that needs to be included in a CEQA document. And then when that's concluded, then we provide all of that information back to the applicant and we publish the CEQA document. The CEQA, when we do a notice that a CEQA document is available, maybe this one will come up, on the clerk's webpage, there are notices. And publications. And so when we publish a notice, it could be a notice of intent to take action, which says that there's, say, a conditional use permit, or there's an application for something that's outside of the ordinary. In this particular case, it's a master sign program. It'll tell you what the project is, what I'm going to do, or what the city is going to do, how you can participate, and where you can find additional information about that particular project. I'm going to try this a different way. Let's see if I can get to the faster site. I have time for a question. Go ahead.
Okay, in the FASTER program, do you have the capability, say for example, if a community member says, I think something's going on down the street, can you take my information of my name, my address, my phone number, my email, and let me know when there's documents that come through that should be of interest to me?
Mm-hmm. So you can always request to be placed on a notification list for a particular parcel or a particular area. We have the ability to notify you when projects are available when an application has been submitted, whether it's for a building permit or for a planning entitlement. Yep. So in this particular case, or in this particular website, you have the ability as the public, any person who's interested, can get onto the Citizen Access portal and can search for building permits, certain types, not all, of public works and utilities projects, planning or entitlement projects, code enforcement, and certain fire applications. So what's nice is if I wanted to search on a specific address or a series of addresses or a type of application, or by just a name of an applicant, I can do that. So when you get on the Planning and Land Division site, you can do a general search by one of these pieces of information, the project name, what if you happen to know record number, how long ago. We only in this particular system go back to 2016 with our records on this particular online system. And then if there are additional information that you wanted to know. So if I wanted to search for applications that were submitted for Taco Bell, I happen to know there were several recently. So there are some projects that are in review. There's some projects that are approved, that are complete, that are approved with conditions. And so over these projects, you can see the type of projects that are available. So I think this one is in review currently, and you can see the status of the project and where it's at and what they're applying for. Okay, so essentially it's going to give me the project information, and then it's going to give me the steps. What is the status of the project? It's in review, and it'll show me what steps are completed, and they'll be shown with check marks. If steps haven't been completed, they'll be shown with little hourglasses. And each agency that has commented, whether it's a department or an agency, will have their information. So this gives me some basic information about the project. This was relocated due to high-speed rail, and it's a new conditional use permit that includes a drive-through, and it tells me that it's a restaurant without alcohol sales, but it also has a drive-through. So in this particular case, it shows me all of the steps that have been completed. So the check mark means it's been completed. It's been distributed. All of these agencies have looked at it and their particular comments. So the district has no comments on this project. Applicant has complied with District Rule 9510. So so they submit that they've already complied with the Air District application, and that way we know that they have reviewed this. And then there are other agencies that will provide their input, and it looks like we're still waiting on PG&E and the school district, and then at the very end, the planner takes all of that information, they prepare the CEQA document, they publish the CEQA document, and then they will, at the end of that reporting or notification period, they would then close it out with some kind of notice of determination or notice of exemption. In the case of conditional use permits like this is, in the case of rezones, in the case of variances, in the case of general plan amendments, those are noticed to a 1,000-foot boundary, which is triple what we used to do. So the city council was very important to them that we had a larger area of individuals who were noticed when we had projects that came through. So it used to be 350 feet was around the edge of the property. Now it's 1,000 feet that we do notices, but we also notice when people have specifically asked for notification on a specific parcel or on a specific area for a project. So those pieces of notification go out as well. So this is one of the places that we've really worked hard over the last not quite year and a half. This went live at the end of April 2018. To make the process pretty transparent as to what we're doing, how you as the public can participate, how do you know about a project, and how do you get involved in commenting on that particular project. So the Air District participates in that particular process. One of the things that we also offer, and it's required for certain types of projects, but not all, is what we call a pre-application or a Development Review Committee, DRC. So for pre-application, an applicant doesn't have to have a complete application. They can just have an idea. I think I want to build a bakery and I want to do it on this particular place. And they just submit that to us, and then we get a group of people together, internal departments, and we say the zoning's right, but you'd need a CUP if you wanted a drive-through. You don't have enough parking. Here's some challenges. Maybe there's an easement for the irrigation district. So we provide back information to you so that when you actually go to develop that project as an applicant, you understand that it may be more complicated or there may be additional steps you need to do. One of the things that we had heard loud and clear over the last couple months was making sure that the Air District was included early on in that process. So as a part of the SERP, the city is committing to ensure that the Air District is notified whenever we have an application that could result in a construction project. And so that's one of our commitments, is to make sure that the air district's included early on, because especially in this 617 area, we want to make sure that the public, or excuse me, the air district has an opportunity to say, hey, there may be additional information that you need to know. There may be incentives, there may be challenges, there may be things that you need to know as an applicant specifically for this district, and the air district can review those before they even become projects, before they even become an application to the city. So we're really excited to be able to provide that information. And with that, I'd be happy to answer questions if anybody has any specific questions about the process or about how we interact with the air district.
Yeah, I'm going to take questions in just a sec. I have a question for you guys, actually. How many of you have ever received a notice? Do you know what they look like? I see one, two, a few. Lots. Okay, I'm going to go in the back. So questions of clarification, anything about the process of the air district coordinating early on with the city?
Oh, the question was, is it easy to change like an industrial, dusty lot into like an organic garden with a farm stand? And about tiny homes, a few tiny homes on the property.
So any new application, we would need to look at whether or not that was a permitted use on that particular property, and then what the regulations would be if it is a permitted use, what kinds of requirements in terms of design, development requirements, parking, site improvements that would have to happen, whether it was needed to be hooked up to water and sewer, were there traffic improvements that would be required before we would even start reviewing an application. And then at that point, we would make a determination, we would provide conditions of approval. So if it is a permitted use, it's a relatively short process, probably 3 to 4 months. If it's not a permitted use and you want to still do that, it requires a longer process of a rezone and typically a general plan amendment, as well as a lot of additional studies that would need to be done. So it could be a difficult process.
So when you're doing the pre-application meetings, you said you're going to involve the air board early. Are they going to be invited to those meetings, or is it the applicant would be told to also go talk to the air board?
So right now, our intent is to invite the air district to those meetings so that they can communicate directly that information to the applicant, because sometimes we don't have enough information to provide good feedback. And so that meeting is very important to talk to that applicant and ask them questions about the project before the air district can even give them good feedback.
Will the planning department or will the air district determine whether or not a project has impact?
So we will send projects within the this footprint of this area that have the potential to result in a construction project. And then the air district would be able to provide us feedback as to what the impact is, or whether or not additional studies would be needed to determine if there is an impact and what potential mitigation would be required. So the city will not make that determination as to whether or not there's an impact in terms of air quality. We will rely on the air district to provide us with that input.
But you just said it's only on construction projects, or it's all projects?
So, and I may rely a little bit on Arnaud, but if someone doesn't have a project, if they're just converting a land use, if there's not a project, they wouldn't be able to analyze the air impact by changing a land use. So if we changed a land use from office to multifamily, or from single family to commercial, we wouldn't know what that impact is until we actually have a footprint of a building. How many square feet are you going to build? What kinds of uses are you going to have there? Then we would be able to actually do some calculations related to traffic and air quality and emissions.
Thank you. Any other questions for Jennifer before we jump to the next item? Anybody confused about how a regular person would engage in this system? Show of hands. All right. Any questions specific to that? There's no dumb questions. No. I see no.
Yeah, well, good afternoon. So I think I'm still having a hard time wrapping my head around it as far as how it would be beneficial to me as a resident, right? So yeah, I think it's a matter of looking at it again, but I was trying to determine whether there would be any way to, would it be helpful reporting any kind of violations or stuff?
Yep. So that is a really good question. So there's also a tab which allows you to look at enforcement, but better than that, you wanted to report. So we're going to go back to the main page. And we're going to go to the Fresno application. I'm sorry if I'm messing with your sound over there. So on the main page, the city has an application. It's not actually run out of my department, but it's called Fresno. And it is a tool that allows you as an applicant to, or as a resident, community member, interested party, to report complaints. So they're typically, some of the biggest ones that we see obviously are 4th of July, illegal firework activity, code violations on private property. So you could identify either by a specific place on the map that you wanted to report so you wanted to report a violation, say, at this location right here. And it's pretty close to where we are right now, just down the block. And you can give your information, which is confidential, and how do you want to be contacted. So we will communicate with you to ask you additional questions or to provide you feedback on the complaint. And then you can give information on the violation itself. Are they parking on the grass? Are they having a yard sale every Saturday? Are they running an illegal auto repair shop? Do they have junk and debris on their property? Do they have tall grass and weeds? That's probably one of our largest violations that we receive from the city. So you're going to report on tall grass and weeds. You're going to then say where on the property. Say it's in the front yard. And then you can describe more information about the violation. So is there anything else you should know? We think that they're, growing cannabis in the front yard, or we think that the weeds are really high, but we're very concerned about snakes or rodents or fire, right? And so whatever information you want to put, and the information will only be visible to you and city officials. You can also make it public, and you can add a photo. This is available on phones as well. So there's an app on your that you can download onto an iPhone or onto an Android device, and you can actually do this in the field. You can click a picture, and you can upload a complaint. Once you submit it, if you sign up, then you will receive notices when it changes stages in the process. Once it's been accepted, once it's been inspected, once it's been closed out, you'll be able to see progress as it goes along. Probably our fastest, easiest one to track is graffiti. Our graffiti team has a really great record of responding within 24 hours. And you'll get a picture back that shows that the graffiti was is gone. So you take a picture, there's the graffiti, and it goes through the process, and then you get a picture back that shows that the graffiti is gone. That's probably the fastest. It takes a little bit longer with code enforcement issues because we have to give a property owner the right to cure. So they have a certain period of time that they have as the property owner to fix the violation before we either cite or we fix it for them.
And I just want to also, so the Air District also has an app. It's called the Valley Air District, and you can file complaints as well. Someone's burning illegally, they're burning trash, there's a weird smell, you think that someone's burning ag waste, all of that stuff, Valley Air District, that's our app. And when you get a chance, don't forget to mention the flyers that you passed out.
Absolutely. The city has just started our industrial compatibility study, and we have been doing community sessions. This is the first in a series of 3. So there will be 6 community workshops each phase of this process. And really, this is an opportunity for you to talk with the facilitators and with your neighbors about concerns that you have about the interface between industrial and non-industrial uses, or heavy commercial and residential uses. This is an opportunity to talk about what those concerns are that you have and what kinds of things that you would like to see to improve that interface between those 2 types of land uses. And there's 2 more this week, and they're both on Thursday. One's at Pinedale and one's at Mountain View Church. But we will have another set of these in a couple of months. In October, we'll have round 2 of 6 community workshops.
Okay, we're going to go Ivanka, and then Lisa, and then Ed.
I know that Fresgo is like a really popular app and a lot of people use it. So right now, if community believes that is the go-to place to make a complaint, once a complaint is made that the city knows is not their area and that it should have been an actual complaint made with the Air District, does the city reroute those to their complaint process? And if they don't, they should. That can be one of those simple things that is improving the complaint system where we have a lot of community residents that state, I've made the complaint, they not knowing they made it in the wrong system. And it may be they are feeling it's falling on deaf ears when actually it's just the wrong system that they should have reported to. So that could be one of those little fixes that if it does get rerouted, it can then just be picked up instead of responding back to maybe the resident initially saying, oh, you did it wrong, go over here.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And that, Ivanka, I don't know, and I think the answer to that is no, that we don't. I think the response is that's not something that we do, but here's another phone number. But in addition to that, one of the things we could do is actually link that complaint to the Air District. I like that suggestion. That's definitely something that we can work on as a fix with our IT people. Thank you.
Yeah, and clearly that goes both ways, right? The Air District to the city and the city to the Air District.
Yeah,
Lisa.
that's good.
Let me tell you a real quick story. Dog park. I love my dog park. A fence was tore up from a homeless person. There were liability issues. I reported it, took a picture, reported it to Fresgo. I needed the dog park shut down right then and there for safety reasons. Small dog goes in there. One of my old ladies are going to go after their dog. No one's going to find them. They're going to end up dead in a water basin. Mm-hmm. So one of the things I have found that every time you file something with Fresgo, you either email your city council person or call them and talk to staff as a follow-through method to actually get something done. Because that's what it took for me to get someone to go and close down the dog park for safety reasons and liability issues of the city.
We've worked, I think this is our 11th or 12th meeting that we've worked on solutions to air quality in our community. In your planning, will you take into account any of those SERP strategies that we have brought forward ultimately that the board will approve?
Absolutely. So document has really been informing several processes that we've got going on right now, including our South Industrial Priority Area Specific Plan, the EIR, that is ongoing with that. Because this area, actually your area is larger than ours, we just have a small piece of it. But the strategies that have been identified here, as well as the input from the public, has already been provided to our EIR consultant to look at as potential mitigation measures. And we are continuing to look at how do we partner with the Air District to provide better development as it occurs. So what are additional things that we can do as conditions of approval of projects? It's not just about CEQA mitigation measures. Some of it's about conditions of approval. Are some of the ways that we have been looking at this. The ICS may identify tools that might change the way we evaluate projects through our development code. So all of these combined together are really, I think, going to make changes in how development occurs in the future. Absolutely.
Okay, before we move on, I do one more check. Any final questions for Jennifer about the coordination between the Air District and the city, how it connects to the SERP, ways to engage, anything? Okay. We're going to have a presentation by Air District staff about the changes that are being made to the SERP directly in response to the comments that have been submitted. If you have questions of clarification, please feel free to raise your hand and I'll try to get to you. If you have bigger comments or want to talk a little bit more in a reflection way, then hold that till the end, and we'll have time at the end to do a larger Q&A. So questions of a clarification, I will come to you quickly.
Primarily Barfield's comments, I had comments on because he's kind of a little wrong.
So for the purposes of today, what I would like you to do is speak from where you are. So try to refrain from commenting on other people's comments, but you can comment in the sense that this is what you think to be true, and that's legit. We want to make sure that we don't point fingers or name call or do anything like that. So Lisa, when we get to this, yes, if you know something to be, this is what is, yes, make that comment. Yes, just so. Jessica.
Awesome. I'm going to kick us off, everybody. Thanks so much for being here and for sticking it out as we're coming to the end of our community emission reduction program development process. At the end of the day, we really want to have a concrete plan for emission reductions to be achieved in the South Central Fresno community that the community and the steering committee can really stand behind. And so that's what we're working towards today and at our kind of upcoming sets of meetings. I wanted to start out by thanking everyone that's submitted public comments to date. We've received numerous comment letters from the city, steering committee members, and the public, and we are working on integrating those comments into the SERP on an ongoing basis. Right now, our last meeting was an introduction to the draft SERP, so we are still receiving comments on that. The document we have right now is a pretty comprehensive plan with a lot of different measures. Those include a cost-effective use of incentives to fund zero and near zero emission cars, trucks, and other mobile sources. We have some, for the first time, we have incentives available for stationary sources to go install control technology above and beyond what's feasible as a regulatory requirement. We have funding available for school filtration devices, which was a really big interest of the community, protecting the sensitive receptors as children at their schools from these really harmful pollution sources. We have fireplace replacements. And then as a kind of supplement to those incentive dollars that are being invested in the community, we have district regulatory efforts, including enhanced enforcement of our residential wood burning Rule 4901, a charbroiling rule, which is kind of going to be forthcoming, and we'll be keeping the steering committee advised of the rule development process as we get into that in the next year or so. We have partners coming to the table with CARB and DPR developing state actions, as well as the city. You just heard from Jennifer. We are working to partner with the city to get those local, more land use centric measures implemented into the SERP as well. Combined with those, we have increased outreach in the community. So outreach strategies with how we're going to involve the public that hasn't been a part of this effort to date. radio ads, billboards, really trying to get out to the South Central Fresno community and let the public know about our regulatory requirements and also the funding programs that are available. And then to back up the strategies we're implementing in the SERP, we have enhanced enforcement measures that are really detailed in that enforcement plan in the Community Emission Reduction Program that was published. So that's where we stand right now. Updates to expect in the next published version of the SERP include additional health information with census tract level data for public health indicators. That's going to be folded into the community description and also included as an appendix for additional reference. That's something we've heard from both the steering committee here and some public commenters at our governing board meeting. We will be including a new measure to address biodiesel and renewable diesel outreach and promotion efforts in the community, so expect to see that. And then we're also going to be including a new pesticide measure, which has stemmed from the steering committee's comments here, as well as working to update and revise our more land use focused measures to include the city's kind of comments and commitments where that's feasible. So I think we've got some exciting updates coming. As a part of moving towards finalizing the SERP, we did want to clarify that there can be flexibility in funding amounts. So steering committee meetings are going to be ongoing. After the SERP is adopted by our governing board, there's going to be ongoing implementation meetings. The district's going to continue to work with the steering committee to receive your community input and guide that implementation process. But adjustments can be made based on that steering committee input to goals and funding amounts. That can also, if we have a measure where maybe there's not a lot of community interest in the incentive program we initially published in the SERP, we can take some of that funding money and move it around to be able to achieve those emission reductions in the community if we have a measure that we see isn't really achieving those goals. So that's kind of a preface to the presentation that's going to come. I am going to kick off our first slide, but the real purpose of this presentation is to go over some of the major comments we received besides those land use comments, which we heard from the city on earlier. So I'll kick off this first slide, and then I'm going to be handing the mic off to district program managers and directors to give a little bit more feedback about their areas of expertise. A major comment we received was that the Air District should form an implementation subcommittee to do kind of guide the implementation process and receive some updates and reports. We don't think that's necessary because that's really going to be the job of the full steering committee. Having the full steering committee's ongoing participation is going to ensure the widest community input and representation. And so we're going to be scheduling regular steering committee meetings where you'll be hearing progress reports on the implementation of the measures that are specified in the SERPs, summaries of the collected air monitoring data that's collected as a result of the camp that we work to develop. And then these meetings can also include discussions of investing additional funding for emission reduction projects, potential changes to the air monitoring network, or any other relevant air quality issues. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Arnaud, who is our director for permits, and he's going to talk about some of the land use or CEQA issues.
Thank you. Good afternoon, good evening. So my name is Arnaud. I'm the director of permit service with the district. And if you hear a slight accent is I'm French. So you don't have to wonder about it. All right, so we received several maybe I need to move. So we received several comments, and at first, the first ones were regarding CEQA and our significant threshold, and the comments was potentially to adopt a different set of significant threshold to be even more protective. The response for that is at two levels. First, for CEQA, the district has adopted the most protective threshold possible for the sensitive receptor, and they are intended to protect those sensitive receptor at the highest level and everywhere. It's not just in an area versus another. We are trying to be protective for those sensitive receptor everywhere, such as for the elderly people, children, pregnant women. Now, at the second level, it's good to have a threshold, but it's also very important to know how you get to those analyses and how you produce and conduct those health impact analysis. And again, the district has adopted all possible conservative assumption, the most conservative assumption, and at all levels possible. The first thing is at the concentration level, how much you're exposed to it, and what kind of parameter you use to enter in those computer modeling to get to those level of exposure. There's different agencies, obviously, that recommend some thresholds to use or to some assumption to be used in those analyses. The state at the federal level, they're all providing us with guidance. We try to exceed and go far beyond all those thresholds. For instance, under federal, we should take a look at the exposure of for cancer risk for residents of an exposure of 30 years. And we go for 70 years. So we more than double the exposure for a long period of time. Same thing for a worker. At federal level, the requirement is, or the recommendation is to use a 25 years exposure. We go 40. And so far, so on. Same thing for breathing rate, same thing for the dispersion in aerial dispersion. Now, the next thing is, so that's the concentration. We also use the most conservative approach and assumption for the emission. And we consider anything can be emitted for a 24-hour period, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, unless we have information that the operation is not operating or the facility is not operating during that time. But that's the worst case that we can use 24/7. And the last one is also we are using, because it's also very important in our modeling, is the worst case weather condition. And we're trying to take the weather condition from the actual data that we get from all across California, and we apply those worst case conditions to the area that is represented here. And applying that, we combine all that together, those worst case assumptions and the most protective the assumption to protect the most sensitive receptor and go from there.
Any questions of clarification about CEQA and health risk analysis thresholds?
Second, so we had received comment about the funds received under our ISAR and VERA program. And the suggestion was to spend money essentially where the emission increase occur. And I'm glad to report that's a very specific criteria in our funding process. We are definitely trying to fund those projects that are located in the surrounding of the original project that result in emission increase. Now, can we do better to reach out to the community, to work with the community to not only identify those projects, to better communicate on whatever other incentive program can exist, or how can we better communicate on the tools that are available, such as the RAN that provides you with on-time information on air quality at any time? Yes, the answer is absolutely yes. And all those measures to further communicate, to further reach out, to further get the local resident involved in finding some project to emission for targeting those emission reduction projects are identified in the outreach measure 01, 2, and 3, and I think we'll discuss about that a little bit later. Third comment about the audit, putting together a program designed to audit those facilities that are considered under the comment as main polluters. Two aspects also are here in the response. The first one, Ryan Ayashi, the director of compliance, will discuss about that, is the district is committed to implementing an enhanced compliance enforcement program targeted at those non-compliant facilities with extended inspection and reporting. And as I say, I will not go too much on that because I know Ryan will, will cover that. The next aspect is, again, the district is mandated by a Assembly Bill 2588, which is the air toxic hotspot program some of you are quite familiar with. And under this program, we have to assess all the facility within the district, meaning 10,000 facility. We've been at the forefront of this analysis. We've been the first district in California to implement this reassessment. This reassessment has started a couple of years ago, and we were the first one to implement the integrity of this required reassessment, which is an enormous piece of work. So under this 10,000 facility, we already reassessed 3,000 facility. And nonetheless, we did that, but we committed to focusing on those AB 617 area or facility and the facility within those locations. So we engage in this process. It's very long. As I said, the setting the thresholds and the health risk are already being explained a little bit before. We are taking the most conservative approach, and we're moving forward. It's a long-term process, but during that process, we're committed to reporting to ARB and to you, steering committee, on the progress made and the findings of those reassessment. Now, the three following comments are essentially in the same ballpark. It's about vegetative barriers. The first one is to consider implementing barriers or vegetative barriers near sensitive receptors, and the second one near highways. I will voluntarily combine a little bit those two, even not exactly the same, but the intent is roughly the same, is to engage and propose or recommend the implementation of barriers, trees and shrub around sensitive receptors, or corridors such as 99, 180, 41, etc. So the measure VB1, which is the vegetative barrier 1, addressed that request and basically indicate that we are committed to working with agencies such as the city, Caltrans, DOT, the Department of Transportation, to nonetheless identify the project, identify the possibility of doing this. It's not possible everywhere, but when possible, we engage to working with them, and obviously to work to find the fundings. It's nonetheless important to find the project, but it's also important to get the money that goes along with. Last week or 2 weeks ago, and we're working with Jennifer, and we were talking about, planting trees is great, but you need to ensure that the tree is alive for a long period of time. You cannot let the tree dying next week or next year, or not having the water to supply this tree. So it's not just a planting tree one day, it's also planting for a very long period of time, and the whole project scope needs to be addressed. The last one regarding vegetative barriers was applicable to a facility located within the community. And I voluntarily separate this one versus the other one because this one is way more localized and specific to some facility. And there is some obvious limitation. I mean, I'm sure you understand that by yourself. There is limitation. You cannot plant trees completely around a gas station or a paint booth operation. That's physically probably not quite feasible. There's some also limitation in terms of risk, just to make sure there's full access to the fire department, access to the police. There's several things that needs to be addressed, and you cannot just plant a barrier of tree around each business. Nevertheless, when feasible and when the applicant is possible, because we cannot impose that to a private owner, the VB1, the same measure, the vegetative barrier, is showing the commitment of the district to working with those agencies to, same thing, to identify projects and to find the fundings that will support those vegetal barriers around those facilities that could be helpful. That concludes my section.
Hopefully I don't have the same issues. Thanks, Arnaud. As he mentioned, my name is Ryan Hayashi. I'm the Director of Compliance, and I'll be going over a few of the comments. The first dealt specifically with facility inspections, and as I presented a few weeks ago on the district's inspection program overall, all of the permitted facilities that we have at the district, we routinely go out and we inspect. We conduct very comprehensive inspections. The facilities have permits with us. When we're out at the facilities, we're verifying compliance with all the conditions on the permit. The conditions are derived from district rules, state and federal requirements, and we're using, not on top of, verifying compliance with equipment, we have, very advanced emission monitoring equipment that we use to verify compliance with emission limits of different pieces of equipment. We're also going through record keeping. We aren't at these sites every day in some cases, so we really rely on the record keeping requirements of these permits to verify that they are complying with the requirements. When we do find non-compliance with facilities, we definitely work with them to bring them back into compliance as quickly as possible. It's important to us, especially if it's emissions related. We try to get those issues resolved as quickly as possible, working with the facilities. As going through the CERT process and developing our enforcement strategies, we committed to enhancing our enforcement and doing more inspections of facilities as if we find emissions violations at these facilities. And then we've also committed to providing annual reports to CARB and the steering committee about the district's enforcement of our rules and regulations and the AB 2588 progress. The next comment dealt with public complaints. So as an agency, responding to public complaints is very important to us. We want to make sure that we're doing a good job. We respond to over 3,000 complaints on an annual basis throughout the valley. We definitely spend a lot of time and effort trying to find better ways to make available to the community on how to report complaints. So not only are you able to call in complaints to our office or an automated line, which will page our on-call inspectors after hours, in which case they respond right away afterwards. On top of that, we have, as Jamie had mentioned, we have the apps available for both the iPhones as well as Android type phones. On our website, it's mobile friendly, and so when the form comes up, it's designed in such a manner to try to make it as easy to fill out as possible. On top of being able to submit the complaints, you can also submit video and pictures, which we use to help us locate and identify the problems. Once a complaint is filed with us, it's very important that we're staying in communication with the people that file these complaints so that they understand what's going on, what actions are being taken. Even if it's an ongoing issue, we'll continue to relay information to the person that reported the problem. And if you file through, so we have the online portal or the online complaint system, you can choose to get a copy of the report once the investigation is complete. The last comment we received was violations for low-income residents. And so one of the focuses of the enforcement is definitely on compliance assistance and looking for ways to educate people that they don't violate our rules. In the unfortunate events when people do violate our rules and regulations, as I mentioned, we often, the majority of the time we issue notices of violation which carry a monetary penalty. So when we do that, there's a process that we have to go through in assessing these penalties. We have to, state law requires that we have to take many different factors into consideration. One of them is financial burden on the individual that received it. And so when we issue those violations, and we do work with the people that get the penalty and get additional information that we can use when coming to an ultimate resolution of that violation. And so, financial hardship is definitely one of those factors that we take into consideration. And in those events, when we do come to a penalty amount, there's options to, for example, make payments. There's the compliance school option where people have the ability to come into the district, attend a training where we explain the rules and regulations with the goal of not having repeat violations in the future. And hopefully they take that information and they share it with the people that they know, so that they in turn don't violate rules and regulations, which lead to emissions, which we all want to avoid. And any questions? Yeah, Ivanka? Oh.
When I was reviewing, I think it's Appendix F of the complaints that we've added into the CERP. Of those 3,000 resident complaints that have been made, the most important part that I was looking at is what is the resolution. And a lot of times in that column, it's saying could not confirm the complaint, or it's saying no violation. But that's a whole lot of complaints that are being made that are then back to community stating that we've complained, but nothing's been done. So that ties directly into where are those enforcements going to be enhanced that can actually add on to, is it just a nuisance that you can't do, or is it a nuisance that there's nothing in writing yet to say that you can't do anything about it as a district? So that is the opportunity to include an enhancement when you actually review those complaints. There's tons of complaints in there, and in that resolution, a lot of them, there's nothing being done.
Yeah. And so, we didn't talk about all the different strategies, but there were several other strategies that we did look at when we went through the complaint process. And so, on a quarterly basis, at least once per quarter, during the summer months, for example, with dust emissions, we have a strategy in there that we're gonna do additional surveillance of projects in the area, making sure they're compliant with the requirements, because that is something that we were getting complaints about, and we weren't always successful in determining a violation of a district rule or regulation. So we did look to add additional measures in there to address some of those things.
And just looking at the post-audit area, okay, so looking that there will be facility audits, in this case, dust, right? So we've noticed, for example, Vitroglass having many notice of violation. Seems that we're just going to keep it at that stage where just violations keep on piling up and nothing's being done. The main question being, will there be teeth and accountability to the community in these terms? And what does it look like? Because I think I heard you say there's a strategy, right? But we as a community members would like to hear or see what that strategy looks like. Thank you.
Yeah. So, as part of our inspections, if we find non-compliance issues, we issue notices of violation. We work with them to bring them back into compliance. If it's an issue that continues to happen, then yeah, we work with the facilities on coming up with something to address what's causing that. And these are large facilities, and some of the violations aren't from the same pieces of equipment constantly violating the same things. They have other pieces of equipment, and so it can vary on the piece of equipment itself that's receiving the violation.
There's not that same tolerance towards community members when it comes to these kind of things, that the city or the air districts goes and cites them. It's pretty tough from what I get from the residents. And I probably have some more input in terms of outreach and creating a relationship, but I won't mix it. But just the idea that we want to make sure that we're being straightforward and equal on the board.
Absolutely. No. Yeah, I mean, if we find noncompliance, we're not in a situation where, we have the luxury of not taking enforcement action. I mean, we have the most stringent rules and regulations anywhere in the nation. It's very important for us to enforce that if we're ever going to reach our attainment goals. So, yeah, I mean, we're enforcing all of our regulations consistently.
It seems like you have a community issue regarding complaints, compliance, collecting the data, and transparency and accountability for actions that you need to take. For example, if you have a community where that glass place is that keeps calling, what is going to be your outreach to that community to address their concerns? I mean, because if you have like 10, 20 people complaining, I would be setting up a meeting and saying, hey, this is how we're going to address it, and being more proactive and accountable as part of the air district than to say, we're just going to collect the data. And who do you report this data out to of the number of complaints and resolutions?
I mean, all of our information is subject to public, as far as getting back to, I think the most important people that we need to respond to are the people that are making the complaints, and keeping them informed of what's going on and what our actions have been. If there are situations where at the time we're not able to verify non-compliance with that complaint at that time, for example, someone calls in and says this happens at night. Well, maybe we didn't go out during the day, but we then try to go out at night in order to determine whether or not there is a non-compliance issue.
If, for example, you have a business that is non-compliant and it becomes, let's just call it a hot spot, how do you handle that? How do you address that back to the community in which is by this hot spot, is if they're complaining? How do you become more proactive? I think that's what the community wants.
Okay. Well, we'll definitely take that comment down.
Yeah, okay, so over here we are capturing these comments, and if you see something captured that doesn't reflect what you said or the intent of what you meant, please correct us. And I do want to keep moving just so we get through all of the changes, and then we can open it up for a bigger discussion afterwards.
All right. Thanks. Oh, the battery's dying.
Oh, sorry.
We're plugging it in right now. Cass is coming. So fleet maintenance, the comment was that CARB will work with the Air District to review if the City of Fresno is compliant with their fleet maintenance schedule by performing scheduled fleet inspections, no less than once a year. Buses that are ready to be put out of commission should be switched to all electric. We have passed this information on to both CARB and the city. We've gotten some information back that the City of Fresno bus fleet is a CNG fleet, so it's already a very clean fleet. As they rotate those buses out, though, we'll be looking for opportunities where we can switch those buses to electric. One opportunity is coming up really quickly. And this is not just for the City of Fresno, but it's for any agency, and that is the Volkswagen Mitigation Trust funding is about to be launched here in the next few months. And a big chunk of that, statewide funding, a big chunk of that will be for electric buses, be they transit buses, shuttle buses at airports, school buses. So that's some funding that's coming up shortly. Urban greening, this is one that has had a lot of discussion already. We are in the SERP already looking to partner with the city and other agencies to look for opportunities. There's actually a website called Relief California that itemizes really well some of the different funding streams that are out there specifically for this type of thing. We began to do some research on where there might be opportunities to do some urban greening, especially in those residential neighborhoods that lack coverage. One of the big questions that we hope some of these experts will be able to answer for us has to do with water. We want to make sure that these trees are appropriate for a very dry climate, which is where we are, and that they will thrive here and not be overly dependent on water, just because if we go into another drought situation and we are told by the state that we need to reduce watering, we don't want any trees that we've recently planted to then fail after we've recently plugged them in. So within the SERP, we're looking for opportunities to work with those agencies and see where we can put together some of these strategies. Fireworks. this is a great one. We're working to make sure that the city of Fresno and Fresno County understand this issue and look where there might be opportunities. I did have a question for those of you who live in this community, though. Are there nonprofits that sell fireworks in this community that you're aware of? So that is going to be something that we're going to have to kind of find how to thread that needle, because we know that for certain groups they are their only income source pretty much for the entire year, and make sure that they have opportunities to still get the income that they need, even though fireworks on the 4th of July and sometimes on New Year's can be really detrimental to our air quality. Illegal fireworks, you can actually report both on the Fresgo app and on the Valley Air District app, and we will get that information out there. For the illegal fireworks, they're already illegal, so if we can get them so that people don't break the law and use them, that would be great. This is a couple people already mentioned this. This is our Real-Time Air Advisory Network. We'll review the accessibility and reach of the program as needed and report back to the committee. This is a really important project for us already. You're sitting in a healthier living school. This is a school that already follows the RAND program. They make decisions on whether to keep kids inside or let them go outside based on air quality. And we want to make sure that the public understands that and that they have the most up-to-date information about this network, this program, the tools that are already there, do more outreach so that folks are aware of them. We do have it in both English and Spanish already. I don't think people are quite aware of that, but you can get that information in English and Spanish. And we're really looking for more partners. There's always opportunity to do more. So if you have an idea of an agency, a school, an organization that you think might be able to partner with us, we would love to hear that. Air quality education and outreach. We're going to increase education and outreach. That's great. That's something that I really enjoy doing, so I'm happy to see it made it in here. We already do some of this stuff, and we're looking for opportunities to do more. One of the big conversations that you're going to start to see some of the benefits of once it no longer is 105 degrees is some public health messaging around wood burning during the winter. That's already something that's not really 617, but that's going to be coming up. We want to make sure the public is aware of all our social media tools, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I will tell you, Facebook Live died on us tonight, so you're going to have to wait till CMAC posts the video. They're going to have it, but you'll be able to watch it. I'm sure all of you will want to watch the video again, having already been here. We're looking at partnering with existing organizations at existing public sites. It might be a library, a school, a health center, where we can reach people where they might already be going. I know there's lots of organizations that are already doing stuff to engage the community. Churches are the ones that we've already been talking a little bit to in this neighborhood, and seeing how we can kind of get them more informed to better reach out to their community. As I mentioned, the tools, we've got the RAND tools, the app, the ROAR guidelines. We have a wildfire page. Knock on wood, we won't need that in the next couple of months, but it's there if we do need it. Smoke impacts, we're looking at partnering with, in addition to elementary, middle, and high schools, also colleges and universities, and then also looking at where we can partner with public health officers and public health be it clinics, doctors, institutions, so that we can get the message there and look at how we can actually tangibly increase our numbers. Right now, we're at about 800 healthier living schools. We want that number to go up. We want all our numbers to go up.
Or just jumping in real quick, if you are a part of an organization that you think would be a good partner for this community outreach and education, please let Jamie and others know. Many of you are active in your communities and know leaders and people that you think should be involved in this, so just let her know who they are.
The next one is financial incentives and technical supports to schools to put in filters that will mitigate air pollution inside. This is already in the SERP, and we are looking at what will work best. There's a variety of different models out there. Some are to come in and work with the larger HVAC system. Some models are to go into classrooms and do a variety of, maybe 50 small filters within a school site in different classrooms. There's a lot of different models, but we're committed to this, and CARB also has put this as in their guidelines for funding. Within households, we already have been working to put something in to the existing weatherization program. So there are a variety of different weatherization programs that already operate in the San Joaquin Valley. Some of you I know have done some work with regard to them, going in weatherizing windows, looking at insulation. We're wanting to expand those programs so that home filtration systems can be a part of them, so that when you go in and you have the weatherizations, maybe you have new windows put in or something along those lines, this is an option in those programs. And I mentioned we're already on board with the schools. Training for community youth. We'll work in tandem with Fresno EOC to create local youth training employment program or empowerment program that will focus on youth in this area and train them to implement strategies throughout the community. We are looking at already increasing the funding that we have for EV mechanics training, and we're having some initial conversations with Fresno City College about potentially using their new campus that they're going to have down here to bring in some of this education specifically geared at looking at electric vehicle infrastructure. We see that as being an area where mechanics who have that expertise with electric vehicles will be heavily employable in the next few years. So Fresno City College, we've begun those conversations. And then we also are looking to partner with other agencies to increase outreach to youth. There used to be a youth and child welfare conference that went on that was all kid, youth, young people coming together here in Fresno. We're looking at maybe something similar to really educate and encourage school students to get kind of excited about these issues and kind of tap their energy and their brain power to get them to bring ideas to the table, really. Todd DeYoung, I think. Is that you?
Thank you. So now, is there some kind of timeline in terms of how we will be implementing these awesome ideas, and as when could the community, educational communities start seeing this kind of stuff?
Immediately. Some of the discussions we've already begun to have, some of the work that we're doing in schools, we actually have an item that we're going to be taking to our board in October that's looking at our schools program and expanding that and seeing how we can do some youth-focused programs. You should see things begin to happen within the next 6 months and continue to happen for the initial kind of 5 focus years of the focus on this particular community.
Thank you. And that's good stuff. And I think this will be also beneficial to the outreach that the community needs. I mean, we need a presence of engagement, not just once in a while. I think one of the things that community do say is that we'd like to be part of this process. Say, for example, on the greening thing, they have ideas. You go out here to Floradora, just in between McKinley and Olive. I mean, just the idea of offering that old train rail. I mean, and those are opportunities. But again, nobody's reaching out to these communities. If you go out here down the street on Cedar, old Kawa Hotel, community, they're eager to participate. And I mean, but the idea is, again, it goes back to, I mean, we don't hear from them. They don't reply back, but they have ideas. But thank you for sharing those resources. I had one comment on terms of, I'll save it for later. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, good evening. Todd DeYoung, Director of Grants and Incentives for the Air District. I'm here to respond to a few comments related to incentives that were in the SERP that were provided. The first one being that the city and the county and the Air District should partner and apply as co-applicants for state funding sources. This is something that the Air District is very active in. We have a long history and very successful in advocating for funds for the Valley, and we will continue that with the SERP process. There are a variety of funding sources out there that we think are good targets for this type of a partnership. And we will always leverage Air District funding with other state and federal funding that's available. And we will certainly continue to do that as we implement the SERP. The next comment is regarding stationary source incentive projects. This is kind of a new area for the Air District. Historically, we kind of focus on mobile sources, but we are engaged with the Air Resources Board right now in developing guidelines and methodologies for funding stationary source projects. And this is certainly something that as we develop these projects and as we develop these programs and these guidelines, that we will involve the steering committee in that development process. and we will work closely with the Air Resources Board and this committee as we identify the specific projects for these stationary source incentives moving forward as we apply them throughout the SERP. And then finally, this last comment was related to income-based incentives, specifically higher incentives for lower-income folks. As most of you know, the Air District does operate a lot of incentive programs that already imply or employ this method. Our Drive Clean in the San Joaquin program does have increased incentive levels for low-income folks. Our Burn Cleaner program also offers additional incentives for low-income residents, and we will continue to do that as we develop the specific programs in the SERP. We'll look for those opportunities where it makes sense to apply a higher level, and as we develop the specific programs and the guidelines for these programs, we'll definitely keep that in consideration as we're moving forward with those programs. So I believe now Chai is going to come up and talk about a few other comments.
Thank you, Todd. Good evening, everybody. My name is Chai. I'm the Program Manager of Planning and Rural Development at the Air District. Let me see here. Okay, so this first comment is to put a requirement that commercial landscapers use electric equipment and also to switch from blowers to vacuums. And just to start off, the district does not have any jurisdiction over the small engines. That's an area that's covered by the California Air Resources Board, and they are committing to take a look to revisit that small off-road engine regulation, so as described in the SERP. In addition, the district is also committing to encourage the use of electric lawn and garden equipment, especially the commercial equipment for landscapers, and we're committing to provide additional incentives here in the community for that, and also including an enhanced outreach. So the comment here is to ban fireplaces and also to prioritize funding for a sole source of heat residences in low-income communities here in the community here. And so, in case some of you may not have been aware, we just recently adopted our Rule 4901, which is a very, very stringent rule where we've identified certain areas, what we call hotspot areas, for example, like here in Fresno County, in Madera County, and Kern County, where we've reduced the threshold where you can burn. We've dropped that down significantly, so that's going to also drop down the number of days that people can burn. So that's dropping down, and that will take effect this winter. In addition, we also have incorporated or added measures into the SERP to provide the enhanced incentives here within the community to replace the wood-burning devices with electric and natural gas. So that's pretty much covers the entire cost of the equipment, $3,000 to go to natural gas, $4,000 to go to electric. And in addition to that, we'll also have the enhanced compliance and enhanced outreach to make sure that people do take advantage of that opportunity. This next one is to expedite the timeline for the rule and the implementation for additional emission reductions or controls on under-fired char boilers. This is a extremely challenging task. I mean, we've looked at this for quite some time and have put a lot of effort in it. It's challenging from the perspective of getting the technology installed in existing restaurants. There's a lot of challenges with dealing with the existing infrastructure, making sure that the infrastructure can support a large control device on top of the roof, making sure that there's enough electricity that can support that. And so it's going to be a huge challenge, but we are working on that right now and trying to get that out as soon as possible. As far as regulation, we're working on that, and that regulation, we will also work that in conjunction with incentives. So we've included a measure in the SERP to also provide incentives to restaurants within the community to install controls for the under-fire char boilers. And we will also, and also requesting you as a steering committee members, all your support and your assistance in building a partnership between us and restaurants that are willing to participate in this. And we will obviously keep you informed as in the rulemaking process and the entire development of the measures for the under-fire char boilers. This one is to promote the use of biodiesel and renewable diesel fuels in South Central Fresno. And this to the extent that biodiesel and renewable diesel fuels are certified by CARB to reduce PM 2.5 and NOx. We will work with local suppliers to promote the use of this type of fuel. And so this is a variety of comments on pesticides, to ban certain types of pesticides, to add a buffer zone, to also have notifications. And so this one is not, the district doesn't have a jurisdiction over this. Although we don't, Department of Pesticide Regulations and also CARB is working together to draft strategies to incorporate some actions into the SERP for this. And we will continue to also work with CARB and also with DPR to facilitate this. All right, then any questions or comments?
I can just add a quick update on the pesticide-related actions. We've been working with Department of Pesticide Regulations on what kind of commitments at the state level that we can make to support this. A lot of that discussion to date has been happening in Shafter, but we can talk with this committee about it as well. DPR is undertaking some new rulemaking on 1,3D, and they are very interested in working with the steering committees to involve them in that rulemaking process. They are also working on identifying resources so they can do expanded pesticide monitoring with a focus on 617 communities across the state. And then they're also looking into being able to do a pilot study in Shafter, but that's something that could lay the groundwork of a notification system for pesticides and the community itself. So we're working with them to draft language that can go into the emission reduction programs, and should have that very shortly, and can continue to have that conversation with all of you about this.
Awesome. Thanks, Karen. What comments?
So just in terms of the pesticides, something that we definitely haven't heard enough, especially now that parents are being more informed. For those parents who have kids at Edison and people who go to the community library out there, understanding that that quadrant right there, 1 mile quadrant, has 35,000 pounds of tax, and that nobody's being told anything about that, and nothing's obviously being put or offered. I mean, I appreciate that you're giving here some light of hope, but we definitely need to see something more concrete and sooner. And I really resent, not from you in particular, but the whole feeling, behavior, or attitude towards people living in the rural area out here and the expansion of these boundaries, is that, oh, this issue is only affects Shafter, it affects Shafter. Keeps on being brushed off. These folks don't matter, but I think eventually people will get the idea that their voice has to be heard, because it's obviously not being heard enough. Those pesticides are dangerous. 1 mile quadrant, 35,000 pounds. These are not all the pesticides. We just selected the very few that are very bad. So imagine. So just another opportunity for improving the conditions for the folks exposed to pesticides out there is thinking about barriers. That's why we need to reach out to folks. And this is something that's not being done enough. Folks are willing to share ideas. Barriers can help the drifting of pesticides. They can give them somewhat little help. So I know there are mothers who live out there, they were saying, let's invest in plants, trees, barriers, green barriers. So just food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have a few more slides I want to get through, and then I do want to open it up for comments. And I see your hands.
Awesome. So I'm just going to provide a quick wrap up and a summary of our next steps in our SERP development process. So we are at our Tuesday, August 27th extra steering committee meeting to hear from the city of Fresno. Tomorrow, the 28th, we have a public workshop at the district offices. It'll be VTC to the Modesto and the Bakersfield office, with the main meeting being held in Fresno. It will also be webcast. That meeting is going to be an informational meeting to discuss the SERP development process, to allow the public or other folks that have maybe heard about AB 617 implementation to kind of get up to speed about the process we've been going through with the steering committees and the next steps for bringing the community emission reduction programs to our governing board. So that is tomorrow. We also asked for comments on our initial draft SERP to be submitted by tomorrow. We had a couple of questions regarding the next iteration of the SERP. So we're planning either later this week or early next week to publish that revised version of the SERP that has the updates we discussed today. We're asking for comments on that updated version to be submitted to the district by Friday, September 6th for incorporation into the final version of the SERP, which will be the proposed version that's published on September 12th. So we'll be discussing that updated revised version of the draft SERP at the meeting on September 4th. Then our governing board meeting is September 19th. Those are our really kind of short-term, up-and-coming dates and deadlines. Just a couple of notes: in October and November, CARB staff has asked to co-host a meeting with the steering committee to kind of hear about the SERP development process, get your thoughts and feedback on the SERP. Then in February, the CARB governing board meeting is going to be held in Shafter, which is where the CARB board will consider both the Shafter SERP and the South Central Fresno SERP. And then ongoing, like we've talked about before, we're going to be having our ongoing steering committee meetings, which we'll be scheduling with your input. So with that, I think we can open it up to questions on implementation or pretty much any other comments and questions that you might have.
Yeah, I see you. I want to ask real quick, how many of you have submitted a comment so far? Raise your hand. How many of you feel like what you heard in this comment response addressed something that you were interested in seeing changed? Some head nodding. This September 6th date is really important. So that's the deadline to get comments into the Air District, to get them incorporated into the draft that will go to their governing board on the 12th and then be discussed on the 19th. So those are really critical dates. Please write them down.
I can't see that far. Sorry.
When are they getting the draft? So next, the 4th?
So the
or
draft,
the end of,
so
sorry.
the updated revised draft that has what we just discussed, the updates we just discussed, that's going to be published either later this week or first thing next week. That's going to kind of depend on our work with the city and the timeline for incorporating the comments we've received so far. We're shooting for publishing it on Thursday.
And so the district is really trying to hear your comments, respond to your comments. So it's imperative that you get your comments in quickly and clearly articulate what change you'd like to see made so those can be incorporated as effectively as possible. I'm going to go Lisa, and then, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, Laura, and then Ed. Did you have another one, or are you good?
Well, I just want to know, okay, so the draft that's available to the public is coming out Thursday. When are those final comments due back to you?
I'm not sure I understand your comments. So we published the draft SERP.
We got the draft right here, right?
Right.
Okay, now you're going to move to the draft.
Yes.
When are the comments due from that draft?
So we'll be taking comments all the way up until our governing board meeting on the 19th.
On the 19th,
Yep.
okay.
But just to clarify, if you wanted your comments to be made, or the changes to be reflected in the draft that goes to the governing board, the request is to have those comments into the district by September 6th.
Yeah, and just to clarify, the draft that everybody has a copy of already, that was published earlier this month, and that was public noticed, so the public is aware that it's available for review.
Okay, I'm going to go to Laura.
We should give incentives for other methods of cooking other than charbroiling, like stewing, pressure cooking, what are considered low-temperature grilling at a very low temperature? Is that considered charbroiling or something else, or other method? Or maybe better regulated grills that are newer, that don't burn the oil? And I also had a question about grants later. There's a lot of grant money, research grants. What about studying hexavalent chromium dust or something around the glass industry? Is that a possible grant subject or something? Who's going to help me sign for the grant? That's the next question. Who's going to partner with me? Because I'm not a nonprofit organization or a 501c3, and I don't know which one does want to work on something like that. But I do.
Okay, that's captured, and we can talk offline. Ed.
One of the extraordinary opportunities that I see for our committee is the fact that the CARB governing board is going to be coming down particularly to Shafter, but do we know the extent of their commitment to our area? And number one, and number two, will we have a time to spend to discuss these issues with the CARB board moving forward?
Yeah, that might be a good question for Karen to handle.
So a couple of different things. As Jessica did mention, this is not the CARB board, but our CARB staff plans to come down to both Shafter and Fresno, co-host a steering committee meeting as another opportunity to hear about your experiences with the development of the SERP, and especially what would you like our board to know as we're putting together our staff report. And then when our board does come down, well, the board meeting itself will be in Shafter. We will be taking the board members on tours of both communities. So we'd be really interested in hearing from you. You know, are there specific places within your communities you'd really like to see the board members to see? And we can talk about if there's other further opportunity.
Yes, if you have those locations, see Karen. Any thoughts? Any more comments? I'm going to go a few more. I know we're hitting towards the end of our agenda, and I, as a good rule, always end on time, but thank you.
So a couple comments, one being on the actually question first. In terms of the schools having filters, would that be just for a few? Because we actually would like to see them in all schools, especially the younger schools.
Okay. What we have in the SERP right now is a pilot program. Jamie can... Okay. So what we have right now is funding slated for a pilot program in South Central Fresno, but then as funding becomes available, CARB is actually working on funding guidelines for that program. And so as funding becomes available and those guidelines are finalized, it'll be pushed out and expanded to more schools.
Thank you. How many schools are we thinking about for that pilot program?
So we have $100,000 slated for the program right now. I think that's about five schools that'll be filtered in total with those HEPA MERV 14 filters installed.
I mean, we wish there would be more, but right? Okay. Oh, thank you. Just one last comment, and I think this is in terms of, I appreciate that those ideas of engaging the community and bringing them to become part of the city efforts. But I think that there's definitely room for more. I mean, something that's been offered in previous presentations is the idea of building capacity within the residents, actually engaging the residents as ambassadors of the city, and this would actually link up and disseminate information to the city. But again, we have to get creative in terms of how we bring the city. Just throwing a couple apps that do have bugs, and actually there's initially the apps tend to have a lot of bugs. And the idea that residents go and bump into this bug discourages them from getting. So the idea is just having more connection to the community. In terms of also having air ambassadors, I think that community won't get the idea of what it is the role of the air district. For example, I was in Huron a couple weeks ago, and the rep who goes from the air district does not speak Spanish. All people there speak Spanish or Mayan, or some other indigenous language. The person who went was monolingual, and I think the idea that people do not get that idea, not that I'm grilling anybody, but the idea is that we have to be very intentional about how we use resources, especially when the resources are very limited, and we're gonna have to spread this money between Shafter and Fresno, correct? So the idea is that whatever we're going to be spending, we have to be intentional. We have to engage the residents in a true manner. And we got to celebrate together. We have to celebrate. We got to celebrate our leaders. We have to celebrate our young talent. We have to bring in research and expose it. So just a comment. Thank you.
And just to piggyback, Karen, I'm over here. Is the community grant program still open for you all? Yeah, so maybe Trish can mention that just because it is exactly what Jesus was talking about.
Yeah, I do have copies of the second year of the community air grants, $5 million. I have copies of that packet, and it closes at the end of September.
Yeah, and we need folks from the Central Valley to apply. I know some of the agencies some of the nonprofits that have been involved here have applied in year one and got funding, and a lot of it is for capacity building and outreach and that type of thing.
This actually goes back a little bit when we were Chai was working on telling us about the incentives. And it also ties to how you just said 100,000 is allocated for the school's air filtration systems. We as the steering committee, we're so having to concentrate so much in such a short amount of time. We're looking at the strategies and what we want to see in there, but we really haven't had the opportunity to have a discussion of what the steering committee expects or thinks the amount is supposed to go to each incentive. So steering committees, when we saw only 100,000 was going to that pilot program, but you have 15 million going to a heavy-duty truck measure, they're instantly like, no, there needs to be more money put towards this when you're looking at it. So are we going to have that opportunity to go back over the amounts of the breakdown of the incentives?
Well, first, I'll just say that's an excellent comment that can be submitted. If you have amounts in mind that you think should be altered, please make that statement. There are.
So if you recall our last meeting when we went over, we kind of quickly went through a bunch of the measures and we passed out the CERT. I believe it was actually maybe the meeting before when we had the PowerPoint slide. We had an attachment, and I believe if we didn't bring it tonight, it is still online, and maybe we can do a resend out to the whole committee. That was a spreadsheet of amount, units, like number of units, how much we would fund for the whole measure, the emissions reductions per. That would be a great opportunity, and we asked for it a couple times ago, but now that you've had time to read the actual document, that'd be a really good place to actually maybe amend that and submit that as a comment back. We've done that in our other steering committee, and that definitely helped a lot to get feedback on kind of this exact type of measure. How much should we maybe increase for schools or decrease for other things that might not be as much of interest?
So if you're a member of the public, the general public, and you're maybe not on the listserv, how do you find that document?
So it's on the AB 617 community page for Shafter under meetings. We will place it under tonight's meeting. That way you don't have to go back to the meeting that it was actually placed under. So we'll have it there.
Thank you. Okay, we are 5 minutes over. I want to get one or two more final thoughts if they exist, preferably from someone who has not yet shared tonight. If they want to. You don't have to. Anyone from the back? Okay. Again, that September 6th date is really important. Please look for that CERP that's coming. Please submit the comments, be as detailed as you can. If there's funding amounts that need to be adjusted, please make those suggestions. If you have any other questions or concerns or needs, feel free to reach out to anyone up here, including myself. And again, thank you so much. I know there's a lot of things you can do with your night. This is not always the most exciting thing, but it's really critically important. So thank you for spending an evening with us. See you on September 4th.
Good job, everybody. Good job.
I'll send a note somewhere.
Good job.